All that I know in life that matters, I learned it from the Lone Wolf game box, from Star Trek, and from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I kid you not. I do believe that these three sources, properly interpreted, are inherent wells of knowledge and wisdom. Maybe with the exception of Spock's brain, the episode from the third season of the original Star Trek. But Buffy the Vampire Slayer, they're one of my trinities of influences. Buffy the Vampire Slayer as the subject of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the board game. Of course, there are also other games based on the same franchise. I haven't played them. This is the first game based on Buffy that I play. And I believe that the reason why I shied away from previous games is just like, well, my usual skepticism about games based on famous franchises. The suspicion is always that the game is going to be a quick money grab, recycling of uninspired game mechanics, sometimes with roll and move, with some depressing stills from the TV show, from the movie, with just some art pasted onto the game. As we know, so many games based on franchise are. That is exactly how they're made, sadly. But then on the other hand, we also have Battlestar Galactica, which happens to be inspired by a TV show and to be one of the best games of the last decade. So I decided, what the heck, I love Buffy, the TV show, so much. I decided to give it a try, especially after seeing an image of the board that was not upside down. That was inspiring, was attractive, because it looked like a simplified version of Arkham Horror / Eldritch Horror with a Buffy theme. And, even if that was just the case, if that is the worst case scenario, well, that's already better than, Monopoly Buffy or Yahtzee Buffy. There already is the chance of more of a thematic connection, because after all, Buffy is about running around in the city of Sunnydale and reacting to what the monsters do, and also preparing for a big confrontation after a sequence of smaller confrontations. And this is a cooperative game in which, in fact, each game roughly ideally corresponds to a season of Buffy, because you have a plethora of small enemies, generic vampires, generic demons, and then you have several freaks of the weeks. You do not have 20 or 22 like in a season. You have 3, but still you have the sense of, like, you start with the smaller people, then you have to deal with larger or more dangerous villains, and at the end you have a confrontation with the big bad, with the big baddie, with the arch villain of the season, which may be Glory, Adam, the Master, etc., etc., etc. So you see how the structure of the TV show also matches the structure of a game like Arkham Horror, which is in fact about dealing with minions until you prepare for the final confrontation. So it seemed to me, well, maybe there is a possibility here for a thematic connection between the TV show and the design that is not trivial, that is not completely contrived. So I didn't know what to expect. I was there, hanging between hope and skepticism, but in the end I decided to pick up a copy and give it a try. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Let me show you how the game works. So we're gonna take a closer look at the game, and then we'll come back here and we'll talk about the game in general. Is it a good game? Is it just one of those pathetic games based on a franchise without any value as a game? Or is it a game that breaks that curse and ends up being like Battlestar Galactica, both based on a famous TV show and a good game? We'll talk about that in the conclusions of my video. Each player in the game controls one of the iconic heroes from the TV shows. We have Buffy, Willow, Spike, Angel, Xander, and Giles. Each hero, as you can see, comes with a set of actions. And most of the actions are standard, that is, all heroes have the same, but then each hero has a unique action that only that hero can perform. Buffy, for example, can move and attack as a single action, and then can stun baddies in her location. Willow can discard magic supplies, which are items that come from a specific deck, to pretty much perform magic artillery, that is, to destroy baddies from anywhere on the board, and so on and so forth. And you have tokens to represent those actions. Basically, the idea is that when it is your turn, you will perform an action and you flip the corresponding token face down. You have regular tokens for regular actions, and then the special token, which can be used to perform your special action or to perform a regular action, because sometimes maybe there is a turn in which you do not need to perform that. So the players alternate taking actions until they have taken all their actions at the point the bad guys activate. Very similar in structure and idea to many cooperative games out there, most notably Arkham Horror / Eldritch Horror. Speaking of those two games, here is a complete look at the board, and the board clearly looks like a Buffy re-themed version of those two games, with some key locations that also have descriptions at the bottom of what the location can do for the players, that is, special resources they can acquire there. When you see that red symbol there, is not good, because that is a passive ability of the location and maybe triggered by the presence of specific pieces on the board. And of course we have connections that allow movement, but they're only used by non-playing characters. So the players, when they spend a move action, can teleport anywhere on the board. Speaking of the people or things, monsters that will go on the board, we have townies that will be placed on the board by game effects, and they need to be protected or else. Then we have baddies that are sort of like run-of-the-mill bad guys, demons and vampires, fairly generic. Again, will be placed on the board by game effects. More interesting is the Freak of the Week, although here's called like the Bad Guy of the Week or something like that. But I like to think of Freak of the Week. This token may represent a variety of bad guys of the week. Here it is, the Monster of the Week. And so you have a deck of iconic monsters of the week. So during the game, that token may represent different bad guys. Right now, it is representing this one. When that token is defeated, that is, the villain represented by the token is defeated, we draw a new one. It tells us where that character appears. That would be the Restville Cemetery. Then we place the token that represents this new monster of the week in the corresponding location, etc., etc., etc. And also, well, the bad guys do various things, but we'll talk about that later. How do you win the game? You win the game by defeating the big baddie of the season. And here you have a variety of bad guys and gals. At the beginning of the game, you choose one or you select one randomly. Each such villain comes with a set of 6 plot cards, which are shuffled together but kept face down at the beginning of the game. And also you may have other abilities depending on what the card of the monster says, of when the bad guy does bad things. But in general, the idea is when you defeat the monster of the week, you remove it, because remember there'll be a card that tells you where the new one is spawned, and you replace it with a clue token. For an action, a player can exchange the clue token with a plot card. So you take one of the plot cards of the bad guy and you put it face up, which makes the villain more powerful, because now the villain can do more things. Even if you don't know anything or everything about the game yet, just by reading these texts, you get a sense that that stuff is not good. So you do this 3 times, that is until you have revealed the 3 plot cards, and by now there is a really annoying group of bad effects playing against you. When 3 plot cards are revealed, again, defeat 3 freaks of the weeks, get 3 clues, turn them into 3 plots. When that is done, the villain reveals himself or herself or itself or themselves and you have an effect that you perform, and also at that point you place a token representing the villain on the board, and again the card will tell you where the villain must be added, and at that point the players need to defeat the villain. How do you defeat the villain? By matching the item requirements on the plot cards that have been revealed. If these are the plot cards that my villain has in this game, then I need to defeat the cards one by one. You know what, since we're here, that's pretty much the key idea of the game, which is to pass tests. In order to pass tests, you need to produce the corresponding items from a deck of cards. So for example, if I want to defeat this plot card, I need magic supplies and a tome. I go there, I discard the corresponding game effects, and then I draw a card from the event deck. And I ignore everything but the glyph, which is at the bottom. If the glyph at the bottom matches one of the glyphs on the card that I'm trying to defeat, then I did defeat the card. If it doesn't, well, tough for me because I failed the test, but I still spend the cards. So you spend the cards anyways, and then you check to see if you actually passed the test. And this is also how you defeat the monster of the week. For example, not so much for the average vampire and for the average demon. For those you use actions. So again, general idea. During the game, you will perform your actions, and the actions are, well, let's look at one of the Carter's cards to get a sense. The actions are, for a single action, you can search your location to draw 2 items. So you simply draw 2 random items from here. You have weapons, tomes, holy water, wooden stakes, the kind of stuff that you expect, garlic, magic supplies, etc. So for an action, you can search and draw 2 items, or you may fight to stun one vampire in your location. So, well, simple as that. I spend an action, boom, and the vampire is stunned, is flipped face down. Not defeated though. I need a special item. I need the wooden stake. If I do have a wooden stake, then I can use this other action here, which is to fight to destroy a vampire in my location. I may also choose to discard the card, in which case I'm able to destroy a vampire without using an action. And sometimes because of the timing of the actions, that can be very useful. But the standard finding on your standard Carter card for all characters, including Buffy, is, well, stunning vampires. You may also use the action to attempt to slay a monster of the week or the big bad in your location. You may use the location's ability. The most common one and the most useful one is to use locations that give you items, so you do not have to search and be at the mercy of randomness. I want magic supplies, then I will go to the magic box and use that ability. If I need weapons, then I will go where I can get to weapons by using the action of interacting with the location in which I am. So very useful action. And then we have to move to any location, and then, as I said, we have the special action. Now, interestingly enough, what I really like about this game is the way the event deck works. And as you can imagine, the event deck, like in so many other games, is what does bad stuff. And very often the idea is like the players take a turn and then you draw the event. Here, the event is drawn when a player uses their special action token. And this is neat because that means that I can choose during my turn when the event is gonna happen. I may not have all that much to do right now, so I'm gonna do it right away, so then I have the other actions of the turn to address what happens here. Or I really know what I want to do, I do my sequence of actions, and then then the event will trigger some bad stuff that will affect that the other players will have to take into account. Common things that the events generate, they may place demon tokens. To defeat the demon tokens, you use a weapon, so say the action on the weapon card. demon tokens are added to the board, vampire tokens are added to the board, and again, these are the average baddies. Then there may be general effects described here. There are also effects that place townies on the board. And the townies have this tendency to get themselves in trouble. So what happens? After you play your turn, fighting against vampires, collecting items that you will use to defeat the Freak of the Week and then to defeat the bad guys, etc., etc., while you're doing these things, you're also trying to kill the general baddies, the generic vampires and the generic demons, because you're trying to protect the townies from getting hurt. What happens at the end of your turn? The bad guys, at the end of the player's turns, the bad guys will take a turn. So first, the big baddie, the arch villain of the season, will perform various actions as described by their main card and by the plot cards. Then you have the Freak of the Week that also will take an action and will kill. Where is the Freak of the Week token? I don't know. I must have misplaced it. The Freak of the Week, in any case, if the Freak of the Week is in the location with an unprotected townie, the townie is killed and placed. Oh, here's the Freak of the Week, and placed on the Apocalypse track. As you can imagine, that is bad. If the Freak of the Week is in the same location with a hero, the hero is wounded, and the other side of the townie tokens is a wound token. So in this case, you place a wound on the token. This is important because there are game effects that may remove wounds from the Apocalypse track, but townies, not so much. And that's okay, because we know for that if you saw the TV show Resurrection in Buffy, is not usually a good idea. If the baddie, if the Freak of the Week is nowhere, well, in a location that doesn't have any victims, not townies, and no vampire hunters, then it will try to move. Well, it will move towards the nearest townie or towards the nearest member of the Scooby Gang. So this is why you may decide to be found at the end of a round in a location with one of the bad guys, because in this case the penalty that you get is a wound, whereas in other cases it would be the loss of a townie, which is worse. And I guess, as you can imagine, one of the ways in which you lose the game is if the Apocalypse track is full of wounds and townies. So this is the general idea, really. Players take actions, the special actions will trigger events that will bring monsters on the board. So the players are running around, protecting the townies, trying to destroy the small-time baddies, generic demons and generic vampires, collecting the items that are required to attack the Freak of the Week, collect clue tokens, reveal plot cards, deal with the consequences of the plot cards, force the bad guy or bad gal to reveal himself or herself. And at the end, they will try to flip the plot cards of the arch-villain face down, which means in game terms to defeat the villain. And if that occurs, if the players are able to defeat the arch-villain for the game, they win the game. I like this game a lot. I like it. My original assessment of like a simpler Arkham horror with a Buffy theme ended up being correct. And you know what? That's good. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Because, well, sometimes you need my first Arkham horror, or, like Arkham horror for beginners, or simply Arkham horror for people that do not have time to play Arkham horror and want to have that itch scratched from time to time, but they don't feel like setting up the whole enormous, complex, long experience. Here you have a gameplay which is tight, but does what it's meant to do, which is to give me a sense, to give me the flavor of the TV show at every level, while also providing me with an Arkham Horror type of experience, which feels pretty tight and definitely more playable. Definitely doesn't have to be like a big occasion. If I have an hour and a half, if I have 2 hours, if I want to play a game solo, I can set this one up, sets up very easily, and I can give it a go. It's a much more playable version of those other bigger games that I mentioned. Maybe a little less deep, but I think that you're losing a fraction of the depth, while Jet is earning a huge part of the complexity and the encumbrance and all the time that it takes to set up and put away the game. My first Arkham Horror with Buffy, that is actually a good combo, and it really works here. The gameplay feels tight, but it feels full of interesting choices and decisions. It's a game to me that has a series of nice balances. One, for example, between strategy and luck. There's a luck element, but you can choose how much of it you want to face. You may go to a location and decide to draw cards, or you may have an entire game in which you never use the action of searching a location to get 2 random cards. You always take the time to go to the exact location that gives you the 2 cards that you want, the 2 weapons, the 2 stakes, the 2 books, etc., etc., etc. When it comes to the tests to take, in most cases, if you had the right resources, then you have to take a test, draw a card, look at the glyph. In most cases, it will still work. So in most cases, you think that I planned, I sequenced my actions, I sequenced my what I wanted to do, I budgeted my resources, and I'm doing it well. But then from time to time, that doesn't work, which is great because it prevents the game from being too cold, too predictable. It spices things up. And if you had a very clear plan of what to do, all of a sudden, the fact that the plan didn't work and you have to rewire your strategy, it makes things particularly interesting. But I like this, that there is just enough luck to keep things interesting. Just enough luck that, well, I think that I'm in control of the situation, I'm planning, and my good planning is rewarded by the game system, but from time to time the game system throws something at me, which presents me with new challenges, etc., 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 which is very important to me because I played a game recently which actually is very similar from a variety of perspectives to this one. The game that I played is Gloom of Killforth, and if you watch my video review, which I released recently, is not entirely positive because I found that the game too much luck. Again, in essence, in that game, you go around, you travel around the play area, you collect rumors, clues, you bring them to another area where they become resources, and you defeat a bad guy at the end. But there was much more luck there, and here I found that the luck element is just right. Also, Gloom of Killforth had a bunch of rules that seemed unnecessary. It was a little fiddly. The core engine was very simple, but then you have many cases, some sub-cases and exceptions to those sub-cases that just prevented the theme from really coming to life. Not here, because you have a very simple engine, and that's it, and that's what you have. From the point of view of the rules, is incredibly simple. Perform those actions, and then the thing will happen, but not because you studied a lengthy manual and then you remember to implement exactly the procedure that turns an enemy into a friend into an enemy that has to deal with that specific case. No, you have a simple core of engine here, simple core of rules, and you follow those simple rules, and yet the theme happens. The theme comes to life through the hard wiring that has been done with the theme within the cards, within the system. The villains, they play very differently. They will present you with different challenges. Some are much easier than others, so you can also change the level of difficulty based on the villain that you face. The different events, different freaks of the weeks, the characters, the heroes play thematically. So this is what I really like about a thematic game. That a game that has just enough rules to be able, through its mechanics, to simulate, to give me a sense of the content that I want to see, while at the same time I do not have a long list of rules that somehow gets between me and the theme. It doesn't let the theme shine through the mechanics. Here, the mechanics are simple, and I'm immediately immersing myself in the world of Sunnydale, and I do not have to worry about making the game work. The cards tell me what to do, and what happens on the board, the behavior of the characters is what I expect from a game that is inspired by Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And it's not inspired generically. It's not just about pasting the art, pasting images that have to do with the TV show. Clearly, this is somebody who watched the TV show, understands what it is about, and was able to, again, to connect the theme to specific effects, to specific content. Like that card tells me something that could have happened in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So that's up at the point, at the level of the represented content, but also somebody who captured the theme at the level of the mechanics and at the level of the values, not just this or that event, but the kind of things that characters strive for. Like the fact that sometimes you will want your characters to get wounded so that they can protect the townie. That feels very accurate. That feels very in the spirit of the TV show. So what do we have here? For Buffy fans, a really nice representation of the theme in a playable version that just feels right at every level. From the point of view of the components, of the represented content as described by the cards, and the mechanics, it really, there is so much Buffiness that exudes from the design. From the point of view of gameplay, which also will be interesting for people that do not know Buffy or are not interested in the TV show. Shame on you if you're one of them, but nobody's perfect. So from the point of view of gameplay, which may interest a larger audience, this is a really good game. It's a really simple but satisfying cooperative game that presents you with interesting challenges, which incentivizes you to play strategically, to create a nice balance between strategy and tactics, react to the madness that is happening here or there, but also keep in mind the long-term goals, so the prize that is at the end. We need to defeat the big bad wolf, the huge, the arch villain of the season. From the point of view of gameplay, again, it's a very, very engrossing because you always have something to react to. There's always bad stuff happening. Plus, again, it's fun to react to that while keeping in mind the long-term strategy. Otherwise, if it's only reaction, then of course it's not all that engaging. I feel like the design is playing me, but actually here I also have, well, I'm playing the design in the sense that I'm doing more than reacting, I'm also planning ahead. So from the point of view of gameplay, it's playable in an evening, in a short evening. You can play multiple times in a single evening. It really rewards cooperation and planning, and at the same time it surprises you and presents you with constantly interesting situations from the sheer point of view of gameplay. So really, really good game. I'm absolutely pleased with my purchase of a game that is a good game per se. It's a more playable version of Arkham Horror, while at the same time also being what I find an accurate, satisfying representation of one of my favorite TV shows and simply one of my favorite narratives of all time. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the board game. Highly recommended for Buffy fans and also for those that are not Buffy fans, because just generally speaking, this is a good, solid board game.